Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor. And you guys know how much I love to do color work, but it's been a learning curve. You don't just start out suddenly being able to do it like a pro. So this video is about some tips, some tricks to help those of you who maybe are starting out with it or contemplating it, or even if you're doing it and you're maybe struggling or you're not totally satisfied. So I've gathered together some ideas to share with you about how to be successful with color work. And just know as I'm talking that all my efforts haven't been like ideal. So that's okay. You know, it's okay to struggle and to produce pieces that represent your learning. So we'll start with starting, which is you might want to start out with something that's kind of small, something that's modest. A hat is oftentimes a good way to go. That being said, a hat has some challenges. So personally, I find when I'm working with something in the round like that, that is kind of small, that I struggle a little bit with the gauge and managing the floats. For some reason, if you hear chomping noises, it's because I've given Ari something to do. For some reason, I've found that I have the best results with gauge in color work when I do something big, a sweater. But another thing that is really helpful when you're starting out, and you know, for any color work project, depending on the kind of result you're looking for, is to choose high contrast colors. So if your colors really look different, it's just going to be easier to keep track of where you're going. The motifs are going to stand out. And if you make a mistake, you'll probably be able to find it quicker and fix it quicker. Now, swatching is probably smart. One of the things that I have found with doing color work is that needle size matters. And if I try to do things with needles that are a bit on the small side, I can run into some issues, again, with gauge and just having it kind of bunch up. It's really important to have your stitches be relaxed. So if you do try something like a hat, what you might want to do is just stray on the bigger side with your needles to make sure that you get a gauge that is going to match with having standard color work be the method that you're using to knit the piece up. Swatching is smart because then it gives you an opportunity to just look and see, am I getting any like buckling or rippling, or is it lying flat, or is it matching, you know, the gauge that I'm shooting for? That it can be a big help. I'm not a great swatcher, but I recommend it. But you have to do it in the round. You have to do it like you're going to do it. And, you know, I've been in situations where I considered a couple of inches of doing a sweater a swatch, and then I ripped it out. You feel like you're wasting your work, but actually what you're doing is you're ensuring that the results will be worth the work that you put into it. Another thing that could be an issue with color work is that depending on the day, the humidity, I don't know, your mood, your gauge can change. So you want to keep track of it. You may actually switch needle sizes just to make sure that things are going the way that you think they are going. Again, if you're just doing stockinette, like say you're doing a sweater or a hat, and you have several rows of stockinette, and then you have several rows of color work, the chances that the color work will be tighter are high, in my experience. So again, you can adjust for that by just consciously knitting looser, which is what I try to do. Or, you know, you could potentially go back and forth between, you know, incremental needle sizes. There's nothing wrong with that. So another thing that can be a trick is if you are doing like a flat piece and you have to purl. Purling and color work is, I don't know, I avoid it. If you guys like purling and color work, let me know. It can be done, right? And I've definitely done it. But your gauge and your tension is going to swap back and forth between the knit rows and the pulling rows. That's why, you know, a lot of people, when they do like a color work sweater, they'll put a steek in there just so that they can make it be in the round. Because if you're doing color work and you're purling and knitting and purling and knitting, it's kind of tedious. So I would kind of recommend, if possible, just sticking to knitting. Now, if you do swatch, which would be smart, you also might want to wash and black the swatch so that you get an idea of how it's going to look, not just when it's done being knitted, but when it's done being blocked. That would be, I think, a really smart idea to ensure that you have the results that you actually want when you knit your entire garment and you actually block it. And you want it to fit, especially because depending on what you're knitting, color work can be a little bit less forgiving. There's going to be less ease, positive ease. It's just going to be tighter, especially if you, kind of fall asleep on the job a little bit, which is really easy as far as monitoring the tension goes. So just be aware that you want to make things kind of roomy, and check your swatch after it's blocked to make sure that the roominess stays even after you've gotten it all knit up. And as far as tension goes, it's really important to try to be consistent. Again, things change, your mood changes, the temperature changes, your dog might bark in the middle of your work or end up finishing his chew and then come to you wanting more, and then your whole mood changes, and then you're like, wait, what was I doing? And you start knitting and your whole tension changes. I find the same thing happens when I'm spinning. So again, you want to aim for consistent tension. Obviously, be easy on yourself. You're never going to get it perfect, but it's something that you want to keep in mind. You want to be conscious about it. Smooth, even stitches matter more than knitting fast. Now, I've seen people do color work really fast. I'm like, well, how do you do that? That ain't me. I don't knit anything fast. So there you go. So then we come to the issue of the floats. So what are floats? As you are knitting, so I've got two colors going here, right? This is what I'm working on. Some of you guys have already seen this. And right now I'm on the flowers on the bottom of the sweaters where I'm at. So if you see the strands of color going across the back, those are floats. And you can see the little X's. So example here, that's like a little X. That's where I have caught my float. Now let me show you something. So this is a very rustic yarn, and you can see, when this is, shall we say, in the neutral resting position, you can even see a couple of floats, like it looks like it's very loose there. But the minute I pull the slack out, then those floats tighten right up. I don't want my floats to be any tighter than they are, because I need for this fabric to be able to stretch, because that's what a sweater is, right? It's not a woven cotton shirt. It should have the positive versus negative ease that I want and need for it to fit comfortably over, whatever it is I'm wearing it over. And if your floats are too tight, what's going to happen is then in the front, the fabric's going to pucker. It's going to be drawn together. Like, say I have, the floats going across these blue fields, and then that whole area could just sort of contract and make like a little bowed area, and you could literally see the floats behind there that are drawing and pulling the fabric together. And that happens, like especially if I'm doing something with 3 strands of color or 4 strands of color, I'm very prone to having that issue, and I still struggle to monitor that tension to keep the floats loose. Again, a bigger needle can help, but you want to monitor that. You want to just ensure that you are not pulling the floats across. And what you can do is, for example, as I knit here, I can, on this right needle, I can just kind of stretch the stitches across the needle, not having them bunched up like this, but stretch them across so that I'm not pulling. Gotta focus on what I'm doing here. I'm not pulling when I'm doing this color work, and I'm just kind of keeping it fairly loose and easy as I'm switching back and forth here between the blue and the orange. So I kind of keep my hand back this way with the right and just keep these stitches over here stretched out and not bunched up, because that, if I do that, then the floats are going to be sort of contracted, right? So that's a really good technique for making sure that you don't have your floats. See, I'm always just keeping this back on the right needle. So you never have your floats just pulling in so tightly that your fabric puckers. By contrast, you don't want your floats to be too loose. On occasion, I've gotten like maybe a little tired and overdone it with the loose floats. In something like this, so this is a sort of a sport weight yarn, maybe a light DK. This is the Rama. It's called Funu yarn, so it sounds like it's like fingering weight, but it's in practice, it's really not. It blooms. But in any case, I make floats. I don't want to go more than 5 stitches. So literally, even if I have 10 stitches of one color going across, like I might, like right in the blue areas here, like this going across between the leaves of the flowers, that's a fair number of stitches. I'll put 2 floats in there, even if it's 10 stitches. Some people will go like 5 stitches. And, you know, if your yarn's really fine, maybe you can even afford to go 6. If you have like a bulky yarn, you probably don't want to go more than 4 stitches of one color before you catch the float. If I'm counting here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's like 12 stitches, I think, on these little areas, like here where the blue is going across. It's like 12 stitches. So I would put 2, maybe 3 floats in there. Because if you have too few, or if the floats are loose, then what's going to happen is it's going to catch. So it might catch on your finger when you're putting it on, or maybe a fingernail or a ring. Or even if you're just like washing it, putting it up, whatever, those floats can catch, and you can kind of have an issue with the yarn getting pulled. My bowels is coming out of my bag here, sorry about that. And you know, can kind of damage the sweater, so, or whatever it is you're making. So keep the floats fairly consistently short. You don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to have it so that your fingers are going to catch or ring or whatever. Now, one issue that's kind of interesting, I had to really study this idea of color dominance. I don't know if you guys have heard about that. So I have 3 colors going on here, and these colors are very distinctive. Now, what I'm shooting for is for the brighter colors, like the green that flowers, the orange and the green to dominate, and the blue to be in the background. So I get to determine as I'm going along which color do I want to have be dominant in any given row or for any given motif. And consistency in achieving that dominance, you know, if I didn't pay attention, I might have like part of this where the green was sort of receding into the background and the blue was kind of like getting in its way, kind of. So how do you achieve that? How do you achieve that? Now, of course, you're looking across at me while I'm knitting, but the way I'll just show this to you and hope it's useful. So the way I hold my color is, so I tension my yarn with my pinky. Okay, so now I have my middle finger going through, kind of doing an FU at myself, and I put the non-dominant color, which is the blue, on the top of that finger, and the color I want to be dominant on the bottom. I am a thrower, I am an American knitter, so as I'm knitting along, that's how I hold the yarn. So I have 2 orange, the orange is on the bottom, so I'm using my middle finger to loop it over the needle, trying to be conscious of, I'm not going to tug on it. Then I have 1 blue, and that is going to, I kind of hold that between my thumb and forefinger because it's on the top of my middle finger. And I keep that consistently going all the way across these rows so that the orange shows up more against the blue. Now, if you do like continental style knitting, it's going to be different. And so if you are looking for information on how to achieve consistent color dominance in color work using the continental style of knitting, then I would look that up. There are videos on that. I have run across them. They didn't help me because guess what? I don't knit that way. Not that I couldn't. I've tried it and it slowed me down. So I was like, I knit slow enough. But color dominance is a thing, and it really does make a difference, especially when you have, contrasting colors like this. You want the dominance to be consistent, and you want the sweater to play by your rules. So you've got to set the rules and figure out how to make them happen. You can also use what's called a one color management, using two hands, like say maybe a continental, or if you do a two-handed approach. There's even such a thing as a knitting thimble. Never tried it, but if you've tried it and you have some advice on that, that'd be great. The main thing to keep in mind is try to be consistent, because consistency matters more than how you go about it. And that's one thing that I've managed to kind of sort of master as a colorwork knitter, is to understand how dominance works the way that I knit and how to be consistent. And I think it really helps my colorwork to have the impact, to look the way I want it to. Now, another thing that can happen as you, knit and knit and knit especially, is sometimes your yarns can get twisted. In fact, I'll kind of grab what I'm working with here. So I've got these two skeins, and they're a little bit twisted. And that twist can travel all the way up to your fingers. And it's kind of a pain to have your yarn twisted up here, and then it won't even move along your hand anymore. So from time to time, you may have to just untwist your skeins and make sure that they are not twisted, basically, right? Can be very helpful to make the process go a lot smoother. So I just showed you the yarn I'm using, and it can be very helpful. I have knit colorwork with superwash yarn, and I have knit colorwork with non-superwash yarn. Here, I'll show you one that has actually the label on it. I prefer what they call sticky wool. So this is a fantastic example. Rauma from Norway. It's very affordable, extremely high quality, and it's got a tremendous reputation for colorwork projects. Again, it's a sport weight yarn, I would say. There's disagreement on that. It depends on your tension, your gauge, the size of needle, how it works out as far as like stitches per inch and that kind of thing. But I would just consider it a sport weight yarn, in my experience. And again, it's going to bloom. So what's nice about this is your colorwork is going to stay in place, because the yarn, it's not going to slide across itself. I've had occasions where my needle slipped out, Well, I didn't lose the stitches because they're kind of sticking in place thanks to the woolly nature of this wool, and I can easily put my needle back right where it was without losing anything. And I find the result a little bit more satisfying. Superwash wool can sag a little. I think it's literally weighed down by the polymers that are added to the fiber in order to smooth out the cuticles. A lot of times the cuticles are sort of removed chemically, not always, but in any case they're always going to be smoothed out by some kind of polymer addition onto there. So a lot of people who do colorwork highly recommend that you use a woolly wool, and Rauma is a great example. I knit a lot with brown sheep. There are a lot of really great British wools for colorwork. You can find them easily because of the popularity of Fair Isle colorwork over there. So it's probably just going to make everything easier if you use what's called a sticky wool, a traditional wool, a rustic wool, so that everything has more definition and it stays in place. Now, as far as lighting, so I have a lot of light all the time. I've got a lamp right here, and my eyes aren't getting any younger. If you choose highly contrasting colors, it's going to help. The catch is that you want to recognize if there's an issue right away. It's really easy, like, to get the colors reversed. I'll be like by feel and not know that I put the orange yarn on top of the blue yarn instead of the reverse, and I'll go like 10 stitches and I'll look down and I'll be like, wait, what? So if things are well lit, if it's well lit, I can tell the blue and the orange apart easily, and everything just goes more smoothly. I can knit stockinette in the dark. I don't need help with that. But, you know, unless you're knitting color work with yarns that feel different, you're going to want to be able to see what you're doing. So good light is a must. And use that light to read your knitting fairly often. You might want to, you know, I've gotten pretty good. I check what I'm doing every few stitches. And I'm to the point where if I make a mistake, I can catch it like within 8 or 10 stitches. And I'll be like, wait, what? And keep really close track of how the pattern lines up with the previous rows, for example. I always have that in my head. And I just check and check and check and check. It's kind of like driving, you know, just keep looking, just check. Where are those crazy drivers out there? Where is that mistake that I'm about to make? I got to catch it, you know. So you want to read your knitting frequently and try to catch mistakes right away. I have had occasions where I did something and I had to frog a few rows. It's kind of frustrating, but again, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. And as I go here, I keep checking on my little flowers to make sure they're turning out right. Aren't they cute? They're really cute. Sometimes it helps to use stitch markers. I've seen literally people who will mark off every repeat with a stitch marker. I started out doing that. I found it kind of tedious, but it is a way to build in some security when you're getting going. I find now that I'm pretty good at keeping track of things in my head, and I would encourage you to reach that point, but you don't have to reach it right away. You know, you can just use whatever crutch helps to make the process easier, to set you up so you make fewer mistakes. So stitch markers can be a big help, especially if you have a repeat that goes over like 50 stitches or something like that. Then I think I would recommend it. I would really recommend it, because then you're only putting like, you know, a handful in your project, and that's manageable. And it might actually be really smart, because then if you get off over the course of a repeat and you're like, wait, that was supposed to end at the stitch marker, and wait, what happened? Then you only have to worry about fixing 50 stitches or maybe 30 stitches or something, instead of having to go and frog 3 rounds, for example. So stitch markers can be a big help. Charting. So you're going to use a chart. And as you probably already know, in Colorwork, since we knit from right to left, we read the charts from the right to the left. My first Colorwork project, I read it from left to right. I was like, this is kind of weird, but somehow it's working. I mean, it's not impossible, right? Especially maybe if you're a left-handed knitter. But normally the way they're designed is to be read from the right going to the left. And some charts can be difficult. Now, a chart like what I'm using for this, it's pretty easy. So this already has the colors on it. And to be honest, when I'm looking for a colorwork pattern, I really appreciate it when it's in color. Sometimes I have an issue if, for example, here we have a white background and colored motifs, and I literally have a dark background with the colored motifs. I'm able to follow it. Now, if I reverse those light and dark colors, I can get confused. So you want to be aware. You might not want to start out doing that on your first color work project. Find something that's got a cream background and black celebu motifs or something like that, and then say, oh, I'm going to do it in black with cream. Because you're going to get confused when you're trying to read the chart. But another thing you can do, especially if you have a chart that's tricky to read, and there are some that are all black and white and they use symbols, for example, in some older books, or maybe you found like a really cool pattern in a magazine or something that dates back a few decades, or something your grandma knit or something like that, then you might want to highlight the chart as you're going along, or you can even use, like, there are devices that you can buy where you just clip it onto the chart and move it up as you proceed through the design. So again, any kind of help or crutch like that is worth getting if it makes your life a little bit easier. Magnetic boards, sticky notes, for example. You know, I'm a big fan of just writing on things. I don't always do it because I have a cat in my lap and I can't always find the pen. I'm like, oh, I'll just wing it. And I usually, you know, I do okay, but it would probably be easier if I kept a pen on hand and a magnetic board to help me. So I own them, and I should probably make more use of them because they really can be helpful. Another thing that's a good idea is to kind of read ahead. So when you're doing your floats, you have to stagger them. If you have a pattern that, say you have a 3 or 4 rows that repeat, and you've got maybe some areas where there's an 8-stitch gap of background and you have to catch the float every time on 3 rows, you can't catch it at the same spot in each location. So in the first row, I might catch the float when I get to the 3rd stitch, and then maybe again on the 7th stitch. Then in the row above that, I'll catch the float on stitch 4. And then in the row above that, I'll catch the float on stitch, 2 and 6 or something. So if you have a repeating section like that, where you have the need to catch floats with a block that has the same number of stitches over several rows, you must catch the float in a different location in every row. Otherwise, it's going to get really messed up. Because you've basically got this sort of weak point at the same spot in every row. So you have to stagger your floats, which means you have to kind of read ahead, look ahead, and decide, where am I going to catch the floats in this row? Okay, now I got that row done. So where am I going to catch the floats in the next row? And just always keep track of where you are in the big picture. It's really smart. Count often. Sometimes you want to have a quick stitch count before every repeat, just to make sure that you're, following things correctly. It's easy to maybe get off a row. I've done that before. So just, counting and recounting. I kind of like having the math going on in the back of my head. It's something that's become a habit for me. And honestly, I think it's good for your brain. It's like multitasking. I'm, following a movie on the one hand, petting a cat, but I'm also, counting in my mind, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, or 3, 5, 2, 1, whatever it is. And following those colors and making sure I've got the dominant color in the back and the not dominant color in the front. Got to keep track of all those things. So sometimes it's good to just take stock and assess, so that you don't have to end up redoing a bunch of stuff. When you are changing colors, especially if you're adding a color to a new row, for example. So at one point I had to add the orange yarn here, right? I had the green going and the blue, so now I have to add in orange yarn. So at the beginning of that row, where I start adding the new color of yarn, I want to catch it behind the yarn from the previous stitches on the previous row. Could be the blue, could be the green, but catch it a few times so that I don't get a little hole in there. So hopefully you know what I mean. So if I was to add pink yarn here, I would want to make sure I was going to twist it around the blue somehow, so that it is going to stay tightly next to the stitches from the previous row. Tension, that's a tension issue that can be a real challenge, especially when you're adding another color. Give the first stitch after a color stitch a little extra tension, as those stitches can tend to be uneven, especially if you're like changing colors in something that's got a long stretch. Even tension is just makes your whole knitting more beautiful. So another sort of basic reminder is to keep your hands relaxed. Avoid the death grip. I've learned the hard way, because I have done a few projects where my floats are just so tight, and it just makes the garment almost unwearable, and I was just knitting too tensely. So keep your hands like really open, and keep the yarn relaxed. Let it just kind of be itself. Don't worry about stressing out over, not leaving any gaps or that kind of thing. Even tension, but relaxed tension, relaxed hands. It's a huge help. Now, if you're doing colorwork for the first time, don't expect perfection, obviously. I remember when my daughter tried her hand at a colorwork hat, and I gave her a lot of instructions. Apparently, I didn't tell her to stagger the floats. And so when she was done, it was like, oops, forgot about staggering the floats. She still has a hat. She could still wear it. She still does wear it. Is it perfect? No. Does it have to be? Also not, right? So don't expect yourself to have perfect results on the first try. Just learn. It's a learning curve, and that's okay. Doesn't have to be museum quality, fruity knitting, whatever. And you're going to keep growing anyhow as you do color work. I've learned all kinds of different things with every project. Now I'm trying color work with the unspun yarn. And that's really challenging because if I pull at all on that, it's going to break. And so talk about being relaxed. I'm, learning it's probably going to be good for me because then it's going to help me relax more if I make a small project like a hat or a sock. It's going to be helpful. So you're going to keep learning. You're going to keep making mistakes. It's going to keep improving. And just keep your eye on the prize of every project. It's going to look a little bit better than the next. And you're going to enjoy all of them. And then when you get to the point where, you're comfortable with color work and you're experienced enough to sort of know what to anticipate and what to monitor for, it's going to be second nature. And it can become just this really cool rhythm. I'm in this really happy row here where, and it was just a coincidence. I looked it up before I got on here. I was like, I got to do what I'm preaching here. Every motif is 2 oranges, 1 blue, 2 oranges, 1 blue. And it's kind of fun. It's like a nice rhythm. And it's just, it's a hair more interesting than just doing stockinette. I feel more accomplished. And yet, it's enjoyable. It's relaxing. It's, it feels good. It's like a cadence. And you see the alternating colors pass by, and you look at how the little flowers are growing, and it's just so adorable. That's the reward of color work. It can just be that much more fun from doing like stockinette or whatever, and you have the joy of watching these colors show up before your eyes, and every row adds like this new life to the project. It's not just another row of one color. It's another row that makes your flowers seem more realized in this case, right? I have to look and see how many more rows these flowers have to get to the top of them. I'm on row 4. Of course, I'm reading this upside down because this is a top-down design, and I'm doing my bottom up. But in any case, I'm on row 4, and after this, I have 4 more rows, and then the flowers will be done, and it's going to be so exciting. Yeah. Now, when you're done with your project, block it. Don't worry when you get done and things that may look a little uneven or a little bit wonky or whatever. If you give it a gentle wash and you block it, it's going to even a lot of that stuff out. It's amazing what the difference can make when you block color work versus not blocking it. And I've done both. I've been like, I'm wearing it today. I'm not washing it. But blocking it is just the way to go. And obviously, after I wear it a few times, I'll be like, well, time for a wash. And then guess what? It gets blocked. And it's like, wow, it looks better. And especially with the rustic yarn, because like I say, that yarn's going to bloom. And the way your color work looks now, with this kind of almost choppy definition to it, it's going to be a little bit fluffier and fuller, and there won't be any gaps, and it'll just look so gorgeous. That's the way these rustic wools often work. It's a really cool effect. I just love rustic wool. So, can throw in a couple of like sort of pro tips here. There are things I have tried, things I haven't tried. One of them is, especially if you're knitting on something that's kind of small, like a hat or a sock. I just caught myself in a mistake, but I caught it 2 stitches after I made it, so it's okay. Then you might want to try turning inside out while you're knitting. And what that does is it increases the tension on the floats on the back so that it forces you to make those floats just a hair longer. And that's going to ensure that your tension isn't too tight. So that's kind of a pro tip. Just turn it inside out and work as you're knitting with the outside showing. It's still going to be the same color work. You're still knitting. You're just kind of flipping it up basically. But it's just a tip. And if I were, for example, to knit colorwork socks, I would probably do that because when I knit something small and around, I have to use giant needles and basically I just really discipline myself. Sweaters, colorwork, I find much easier. I'd be really curious if others of you feel the same way. Another tip that is recommended is always using the motif colors, whatever the motif is that's sort of standing out from the background, that should be considered dominant, and you should position that yarn for dominance as you're holding it when you're knitting. And do that consistently, and then the motifs will stand out just a little bit, and they'll look even the way that they're supposed to. A lot of times you're going to get tired. I find, I don't know, when I'm knitting sweaters, I don't get as tired. When I knit socks, it's something about that close work that just kind of makes me get a little bit tired. But, you know, if you do, you can try switching knitting styles. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you have a versatile grasp of different ways of knitting, like two-handed versus one-handed, go for it. I don't have that, so what I do is I just take breaks. You're better off taking breaks and slowing down the entirety of the project than, you know, having pain and hurting yourself and knitting something that you're not proud of because, you know, you did it sort of under duress. We don't want that. So yeah, if you get a little bit tired, you know, just take a break. Another thing you can do is, in order to just really get a handle on making sure, if you have a complicated pattern like a fair isle or something like that, you can try to take pictures of it. And sometimes then you can diagnose problems with tension or color dominance or placement that might not have been obvious to you when you're just like looking at it in real life. So it's just a trick that some people use to, you know, keep track of their work and make sure it's going the way that you really want it to. Perfectly even color work is what we strive for. It's a goal. And it's probably going to come with practice. So you're not going to achieve it the first day because you're going to struggle a little bit with figuring out, you know, what needle size should I use? And I've been guilty of, like, you know, on the ribbing, I want to use a smaller needle, and then I forgot to change it, and then I changed it a couple rows in. Oops. I tend to keep going, you know. The earth isn't going to cave in because my bottom 6 rows are a little bit more like close knit than the rows above it. And I've done that before. But even color work is kind of your goal. So whatever you can do to kind of maintain that that goal and train yourself to do what's needed in order to achieve that, that's great. You know, that's great. Nice to, you know, get together with friends and get encouragement and show them what you're doing. Maybe even share them on, you know, Facebook or TikTok or wherever you like share stuff and just get people's reaction. Because you'd be amazed. People are like, whoa. And it's really encouraging to get people's reaction to color because it does have a unique beauty to it that you can knit and make something that's so pretty with multiple colors. And people think, oh, it just looks so difficult. Well, it's not that difficult. It's really not. So seek encouragement and pat yourself on the back whenever you get another row done or a motif done or you reach the yoke and you're like, whoopee. That's the way it should be. So if you guys have any questions about color work, feel free to let me know. I haven't tried all of it. I haven't tried like mosaic knitting, or I haven't done intarsia yet. There are different kinds of color work that besides stranded, this is stranded color work. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you think I can answer with flow management or whatever it is. So I hope that you enjoy doing color work as much as I do. It's really satisfying. And keep me posted, you know, if you do a project and you make some progress, I'd love to know about it. So you guys take care. Have a great 4th. We'll talk soon.